Hello, it's the Range Ronin. It is pretty hard for me to get excited about pistols these days. They all seem to be the same polymer, striker-fired boring copies of a popular polymer pistol known to many. However, I have found one pistol I am pretty excited about. Stick with me, because I am going to tell you all about it. The Smith Wesson CSX had a ton of potential. It was lightweight, reliable, and boasted several features that made it ideal for concealed carry. It had, however, some problem areas. One purported problem area was the trigger. A lack of a definite reset point was the major complaint. You may have noticed that I speak of the CSX in past tense. That's because the CSX has been discontinued, but has been replaced with one far much better, the CSX E-Series, one which I am developing a fondness. First, let me start with the basic specifications. As you may or may not know, I have been carrying the Glock G48 for most of this summer of 2025. While I consider the G48 a utility firearm, I still prefer a hammer-fired pistol over a striker-fired pistol. I am an old FUD, okay? Tagged as a micro-compact pistol, the CSX E is much smaller in size than the G48. But it has a grip length that actually allows me to get all of my digits on the grip, although the girth is very slim. It is much closer in size with my Sig Sauer P365X Macro that, as you know, is a striker-fired pistol, whereas the CSX E is a hammer-fired pistol. So, let me present the features of the CSX E, as I will call it from here on, beginning with the sighting system. A 3-dot sighting system is used, with each dot being of the white color. It will stay that way, at least for now, as I determine if a different color is needed for my eyes. The front sight is adjustable for windage only. Just to the rear of the front sight are serrations that help cut glare, while the rear 2-dot sight is somewhat unique. The rear sight should not be moved from its centered position. While the rear sight resides in a dovetail slot, part of that dovetail slot is the optic plate. If you remove the optic plate to install an optic, say a RMSC or the Holosun 401K, you do lose the rear sight. Depending on the optic, you may still have a rear sight for co-witnessing. Otherwise, it's through the optic only. I have no intention of installing an optic on the CSX E. The sights are more than adequate for these old eyes and for my intent and purpose of the pistol. There are available, however, night sights that might sit better for you. The slide itself is very well textured with both forward and rear serrations. I do like that Smith Wesson kept a cocking ledge at the rear of the slide to assist in manipulating the slide. The ledge is not prominent though, but it does help when manipulating the slide with the thumb and forefinger. I would not consider the slide as an easy rack because it does take some hand strength to manipulate the slide, but it is not as stiff to operate as some. CSX E-Series can be seen on the left side of the slide along with the Smith Wesson logo. On the right side of the slide, just below the external extractor, is a prominent caution, capable of firing with magazine removed, warning. This CSX-E has a 3.4-inch barrel, riding within the slide. At the rear of the chamber, there is a chamber inspection port, or witness hole, if you will, that you can look into to verify if the CSX-E has a chamber loaded or not. As previously mentioned, the CSX-E has an external extractor, not which is uncommon these days. It seems to do its dedicated job well during live fire, and also when using snap caps for dry fire. That, by the way, is advocated by Smith Wesson, although they do claim that the CSX-E can be dry fired without them, without damaging the pistol. At the rear of the slide, you will note something is different about the CSX-E as compared to many pistols. A hammer, unlike my G48 and SIG P365 X Macro striker fired pistols, and which is one of the reasons I was drawn to the CSX-E. The skeletonized hammer spur is very small, but well serrated, and cocking the hammer from a rest position takes a bit of concentration. There are 3 hammer positions: rest, half cock, and full cock. You would think that the CSX-E is a single-action pistol, like a 1911. Well, in fact, it is a single-action only pistol, like a 1911, with a caveat, and the hammer is stiff, like that of a 1911. When fully cocked, the hammer spur rests nicely within an extended beaver tail. That prevents the hand from hammer bite. Now, there have been reports of slide bite with the CSX, and it is quite possible with the CSX-E if you get too much flesh of the hand around the extension, as the slide rides low on the frame. I haven't experienced slide bite yet, but perhaps I will if I try to get too high of a hold on the handle. So, being a single-action pistol, what safeties are present? The first safety is a trigger paddle within a polymer flat-face trigger that, to tell the truth, would be near impossible not to press, as the outer edges are flush with the sides of the trigger shoe. A second safety is an ambidextrous thumb safety, a small lever that resides on both sides of the pistol. That, incidentally, is difficult to place into the up safe position with the thumb, and which can pinch the trigger finger on the opposite side if you don't keep the trigger finger out of the way. Ask me how I know. The small thumb safety is easy to push into the low fire position with the shooting hand thumb, but the pinch condition can still occur to the trigger finger if not kept out of the way. Ambidextrous thumb safety finger pinching is not new to me, after receiving such even on full-size 1911 base pistols equipped with extended ambi-thumb safeties. I would prefer a left-side only thumb safety on the CSX-E, but then that would mean lefty operators would not enjoy a finger pinch like the rest of us righty operators. We want to be all-inclusive now, don't we? A note about the thumb safety is that, unlike a 1911, the slide can be moved to the rear with the safety in the up, safe position. What this means is that you, with an empty pistol, can engage the safety lever, lock the slide to the rear, insert a loaded magazine, close the slide, and the thumb safety is already in the safe position, thus rendering the pistol safe without having to push the safety lever to the up, safe position. The last safety is an internal safety that prevents the pistol from firing if out of battery, a feature quite common to virtually all pistols. Also ambidextrous is the slide lock, a small but an easily reachable by both hands lever. Something that you might notice to be different between the left and right slide lock is that nestled within the right slide lock is a pin. That is the slide lock removal pin. I'll show you how that works in the maintenance segment. Getting to the trigger, it is a flat-faced affair with, as mentioned, a trigger safety lever. The trigger pull weight equaled 4 pounds 15.2 ounces with a 5-pull average. Not the best of triggers, I would say, but it is serviceable. Trigger reach on this beauty is right at 2.5 inches, with the largest grip adapter installed, for those who need to know. Once the trigger safety lever is pressed, there is very little free play until resistance is felt. A short, but somewhat gritty, when new pull to the rear drops the hammer with a crisp break. I could not feel any perceptible over travel. Now comes the part that I am interested in: trigger reset. I don't have a CSX to compare, so I can't address any difference between the CSX and CSX E trigger resets, but I can tell you about the CSX E trigger reset. Trigger reset is very short. I could hear and feel the reset point, at which point pulling the trigger drops the hammer, just like it should. I measured about 0.1 inch of forward travel before a reset took place. That's pretty darn short in my book. Slide to frame fit is slightly loose, both to the side and up and down. I can shake the pistol and hear and feel slide movement. I'll see what effect that has, if any, during the range session. I did expect a tighter slide to frame fit, just to let you know, being that the CSX E is an improved version of the CSX. Now, let me talk about the frame. No left side frame markings are present, but the right side of the frame has the serial number and the origin of manufacture just to the rear. There is no under rail, not that it needs one. I like that it does not have one. The trigger housing is nicely rounded with a slight undercut at the rear that blends in nicely with the front grip polymer textured insert. This insert is fixed in place, but there is a bit of play when the grip is, well, gripped. That can be bothersome to some. The front grip insert does have an aggressive sandpaper-like texture to it, much like the grip adapter. The grip area is nicely contoured, much like the SIG P365X Macro, and, like the P365X Macro, is a bit on the thin side for my hands. However, when gripping the CSX-E, the hand is pulled right into that grip texture. It feels very solid in the hand. I'll see how that works out during the range segment. The CSX-E came with a large adaptable palm swell grip insert installed, but a small adaptable palm swell grip insert comes with the pistol. With the smaller version installed, there is uncovered material in the grip area that might be bothersome to the feel of the grip for some. It was to me, and I opted to leave the larger unit installed. Although being labeled as a micro compact pistol, the grip length is substantial enough for me to get all of my support digits on the grip without a magazine installed. With the pistol in line with my wrist, the first joint of my trigger finger just falls into place on the face of the trigger. While my trigger finger seems to be slightly cramped, the feel is actually pretty natural, at least to me. With a short trigger stroke straight back, I don't foresee having an issue with pulling the front end off target during live fire, but we'll see about that. The magazine well is nicely beveled to assist with loading magazines. That's a nice feature. And speaking of magazines, 3 were provided. A 15-rounder flush fit unit that works well with the large interchangeable palm swell grip insert that also incorporates a grip extender, and a 17-rounder that further lengthens the grip. A magazine grip spacer is provided that, when installed on the 17-round magazine, takes up the gap between the bottom of the grip and the magazine base. And then there is the 12-round magazine that can only be used with the smaller interchangeable palm swell grip adapter installed. The 12-round magazine has a spacer already installed for use with the small palm swell adapter. There is a tall magazine sleeve included with the CSX E that slips over that 17-round magazine. That, in turn, locks into place with the other slip-on magazine adapter for when the 17-round magazine is used with a small palm swell adapter. This is all pretty darn confusing for my meek and weak brain to handle. I'll just run the large palm swell grip adapter with both the 15-round and 17-round magazines and forego the hassle of switching palm swell adapters and shortening the grip. Those with small hands may opt for the small palm swell adapter and run with the 12-round magazine with the 15-round and or 17-round magazine as spares. As a side note, all magazines, regardless of size, are listed at $42 at the Smith Wesson website. I did manage to find 15-round and 17-round magazines for the CSX E at the Gun Mag Warehouse website, but they were actually more expensive than those listed on the Smith & Wesson site. Go figure. Okay, back to the matter at hand. Magazines need to be locked into place and released on demand. That is taken care of by the magazine release assembly that is initially installed left side only. Now, making the magazine release assembly available for left-handed shooters is not simply swapping out sides. That would be too easy. A separate right side magazine release assembly is provided with the CSX E. A small flat-tip screwdriver is required to remove and install both magazine release assemblies. That is something I am not going to cover in this review. I simply refer you to the Safety and Instruction Manual for CSX E-Series pistols for that information. Are we having fun yet or what? To finish up this segment, I am just going to reiterate that the CSX E has an aluminum alloy frame with flat black finish and a stainless steel slide with armornite finish. The overall look of the CSX E is utilitarian, but with modernistic touches. It is optic ready to accept RMS-C or 507K optics. As with the magazine release assembly, I am not going to address optics. Installing and uninstalling optics is covered in the Safety and Instruction Manual for CSX E-Series pistols. The size and fully loaded weight of the CSX E should make for a convenient carry, although I would recommend an inner shirt between the grip and outer shirt should the CSX E be carried IWB in a holster without a sweat guard of some nature. The aggressive grip texture may cause some friction burn if carried next to the skin. Okay, let me get out of this segment and talk about maintenance. At this point, I would normally steer you to the CSX E Safety and Instruction Manual for disassembly and assembly processes. But since the CSX E is a tad different, I'll cover disassembly and assembly here. However, I still will advise you to refer to the manual for cleaning, inspection, and lubrication. Now, prior to disassembling the CSX E, let's first make sure it is safe to do so. To begin the safety check, hold the pistol with your finger off of the trigger and outside the trigger guard. Point the muzzle in a safe direction. Push the manual thumb safety fully up into the safe position. Press the magazine release and remove the magazine from the pistol. Grab the slide from the rear with the thumb and fingers and briskly draw the slide fully rearward in order to extract any cartridge from the chamber and clear it from the pistol. Do not obstruct the ejection port because doing so can interfere with the ejection of a cartridge from the pistol. With the slide held fully rearward, lock the slide in the open position by pressing upward on the slide stop and then allowing the slide to move slightly forward to engage the slide stop. Ensure that the chamber is empty. Draw the slide slightly rearward to unlock the slide stop and slowly lower the slide to the closed position. With the pistol pointed in a safe direction, move the manual safety lever fully down to the fire position. With your thumb firmly on the hammer, pull the trigger to the rear and hold it while lowering the hammer to the forward at rest position, and then release the trigger. Disassembly is performed immediately after the safety check has been completed, while, once again, ensuring that the pistol is unloaded and the magazine removed. Hold the pistol and make sure your trigger finger is off of the trigger and outside of the trigger guard. Press the manual safety lever fully up into the safe position. Draw the slide back to align the takedown notch with the hump on the takedown pin. From the opposite side of the pistol, use a small drift or punch to press the takedown pin out of the pistol to the left. The tool provided with the pistol can be used. Remove the slide from the frame by pulling it forward while being careful to retain the recoil spring and guide rod assembly. Remove the recoil spring from the slide assembly. Remove the barrel from the slide assembly. The CSX E is now ready for cleaning, inspection, and lubrication. For lubrication, I am just going to point out the areas established by Smith Wesson for the CSX E. Now, let's take a look at all of these sub-assemblies. Now, let me show you how to assemble the CSX E. Position the slide so that the bottom is facing upward. Install the barrel into the slide. Position the barrel in the slide so that the muzzle is flush with the end of the slide and the barrel lug is up and the chamber fully seated into place. Insert the protruding button, the smaller end, of the recoil spring assembly into the slide guide housing. The rear of the spring assembly goes against the barrel lug. Make sure the recoil spring assembly is properly centered as shown. Holding the slide with barrel and recoil spring firmly in one hand, push the slide onto the frame rails. Position the slide with the takedown notch aligned. While holding the pistol with the takedown notch aligned, push the takedown pin into place until it clicks. Allow the slide to move fully forward to the closed position. Cycle the slide a few times to ensure proper slide operation with no binding. Now, let's move on to the function check. A function check using 1 or 2 snap caps allows you to check for safety operation, cartridge extraction and ejection, and slide lockback on last round capabilities. I leave using snap caps up to you, but I do highly recommend using them. Insert 1 or 2 snap caps into an empty magazine. Insert the magazine into the pistol. Cycle the slide to chamber the first snap cap. Push the thumb safety up to the safe position. The CSX E is now in Condition 1 status, as it would be for normal carry. Pull the trigger. The hammer should not fall. Place the manual thumb safety down into the fire position. Attempt to pull the trigger without touching the trigger safety lever. The trigger should not move into the frame. Attempt to pull the trigger while pressing the trigger safety lever. The hammer should fall. Place the thumb safety in the up safe position. Retract the slide fully. The first snap cap should be extracted and ejected. Release the slide to chamber the next snap cap. This returns the pistol to the Condition 1 status. Pull the slide completely to the rear. The remaining snap cap should be extracted and ejected. The slide should lock back on the unloaded magazine. With the function check completed, let's get to the next segment. Hi ho, it's to the range I go. Okay, promise that I won't do that again. Okay, my fellow firearm fanatics, it's time to put the CSX E through a preliminary function and accuracy check. At least, my functioning and accuracy with it. Your results may vary. I will be using the provided 15-round and 17-round magazines during this evaluation. As a side note, Smith & Wesson does state that plus P ammunition is fine to run through the CSX E. But for me, and for right now, standard 9mm Luger range and defensive ammunition is fine. Plus P plus ammunition is not recommended by Smith & Wesson. To me, the CSX E feels thin but solid in the hand, much like my 6-hour P365X macro. I am hoping to wring out some acceptable accuracy with the CSX E on this first day at the range. As usual, I'll provide comments during the range session, followed by a range day synopsis. So, let me get to it. Should you like the Smith Wesson CSX E-Series pistol, it would make for a nice and concealable carry in any position on the body, with a good holster of your choosing. There are quite a few holsters available for the CSX E, mainly Kydex, from what I can tell. I have not ordered a holster for this one as yet, but one is interesting to me. A Craft IWB cross-draw product specifically for the 3.6-inch barreled version of the CSX E. Compared to available Kydex holsters, this one is leather and a bit on the pricey side, but I do prefer leather over Kydex, and I do prefer cross-draw carry these days. Do your research, and I am sure that you will find a holster for the CSX E that will satisfy your needs. The Smith Wesson CSX E-Series pistol is an upgraded CSX. I, and you, have seen this happen before. For example, there was the Smith & Wesson Bodyguard 380. A much improved version, the Bodyguard 2.0, soon followed. Many who purchased the Bodyguard 380 were disappointed and opted to trade it in or sell it and go for the Bodyguard 2.0. Now we have the CSX. Again, a disappointment for some. Although I was enticed by this hammer-fired micro-compact chambered for the 9mm cartridge, I had read articles and watched videos regarding its shortcomings and passed on it. When the CSX E-Series arrived on the scene, however, my interest was again piqued, as there were many positive reviews of it. I succumbed to my interest and decided that I needed one. Now, I do have two Smith & Wesson 1911 base pistols, a 9mm Performance Center and an E-Series 1911 chambered in .45 ACP. Both ran perfect right out of the gate. There was no need for Smith & Wesson to come out with an improved version, as they got things right the first time. So now, as with other firearm manufacturers, I have to ask, why can't you get it right the first time? It seems that 6 Hour, with the P320, M17, M18 debacle, suffers from first-time failures as well. The best I can say is that I have really toned down my desire to purchase new firearms, at least until they have been fully vetted by the public and corrected of any deficiencies by the manufacturer. In the case of the CSX and Bodyguard series, Smith & Wesson somewhat revamped things to come up with a better product than what was previously released, but it seems like that happens quite frequently. Think about the M&P series. Anyway, back to the CSX E. So far I like it, although it does have a few quirks, like the thumb safety pinch and possible slide pinch, the effect of having large hands wrapping around a small grip. The CSX E handled and shot well, at least well enough to consider it as a viable self-defense pistol to carry. I have no complaints about magazine capacity with this one. I'll be ordering one more 15-round unit as a backup and a 17-round unit to add to the spare carry. As mentioned, the larger grip adapter will remain on the pistol, although some may prefer the smaller grip adapter, which I did not. Some may opt for an optic, and that is easy enough to install. For me, stock sights are just fine for my intended use. Well, it's that time for me to depart. I hope that you found the review useful, should you be considering the CSX E-Series for a PDA, Personal Defense Assistant. I hope to see you again for my other gun and gear reviews, and don't be afraid to stop by any time to watch my previous reviews. I always have you in mind when I create them. For now, be vigilant, be armed, and be safe wherever your travels may take you.